How come that a single man who didn't even go to film school basically steps on every conventional idea of what cinematic storytelling is supposed to be, and still almost everyone seems to love it? Christopher Nolan might have amassed one of the most loyal and dedicated fan bases in the whole media world, to a level that I only know from the likes of Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. All of Hollywood seems to let themselves spoon-feed by Christopher Nolan like hungry toddlers, even though there is actually quite a lot of criticism for his filmmaking. Over-exposition and unimaginative character arcs just being a few examples. Still, he has proven time and time again that his way of making cinematic experiences works. But why is that? In this video, this is exactly what I want to look at. What is this distinct way that Nolan uses to make his movies, and why does it resonate so well with his audience? I have some ideas about that, and at the end of this video you too might have a better idea of what could be the appeal of Christopher Nolan's rather unique style. Or maybe not, maybe it's just picture make big boom, good boy like watching Big Boom and I'm just overthinking things. But anyway, let's find out. I enjoyed all of Nolan's films so far, some more than others, but I have yet to find one that I would consider totally unwatchable and not being able to make me think and reflect. Something I value a lot in storytelling. Still, in this video I will not give an overview about all of Christopher Nolan's huge body of work, but rather focus on a few select pieces, including the newest one, Oppenheimer, that I believe serve as a good example for the themes that I'd like to analyze. I'm sure you can find examples for those themes in other movies as well, both from within Nolan's filmography and outside of it. And if something especially characteristic comes to your mind, please leave a comment in the comment section below this video. I'd really love to read about it. If you're not familiar with Nolan's movies, or maybe just know the Batman movies, Oppenheimer might not be what you expect. Like most of his projects, the film is visually stunning and on a technical level definitely top tier. The cinematography and the aesthetics are spectacular, and it is very easy to just lose yourselves into the visuals and let the movie talk to you in that way. From my point of view, you could get an idea of most of the themes and ideas of the story solely through the pictures and the sound. But Nolan is also known for his plot structures that can be a bit unconventional. As I'm writing the script for this video, I just watched Oppenheimer at the theater, and I'm very certain that I have to rewatch the film a few times to properly talk about everything that is going on. So take everything that I say now as a first impression, because that's basically what it is. Oppenheimer is the story of the Manhattan Project, following the titular protagonist, J. Robert Oppenheimer, building the atom bomb that would be thrown onto Japan at the end of World War II. The film was adapted from the 2005 biography American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin. I was quite intrigued by the idea of Nolan making a biopic because, from my point of view, Nolan usually doesn't make pictures that are character focused. That doesn't really mean that he designs bad characters, in no way, but if you think about it, most of his movies do not really revolve around character, but the world and society around them, with the characters just being a means to an end, to tell the story of some event, some world, or some idea. If you go through the hero's journey, one of the classical ways to structure a story, you usually create a character that has some intrinsic problem which they have to overcome, and the story usually ends with the protagonist finding out what this problem is and then either overcoming it or paying the price for it in a more dramatic setting. In Christopher Nolan's films, I sometimes ask myself, did the protagonist really change? They sometimes do, but never in as obvious a way as in many other mainstream run-of-the-mill Hollywood pictures. And even with the ones that do, like Cobb in Inception or Bruce Wayne in Batman, it doesn't seem like this progression is really what Nolan is most interested in. Oppenheimer ended up being quite similar. While we follow Oppie all the way from his time as a student to the time after the end of World War II, I didn't actually think that the character changed much during that time. As Robert Downey Jr.'s character claims at the end of the film, I think he would do it all over again. What changed was not the character, but the world around the character and the situations he was thrown in. When I think about a changing world, I quickly drift towards the ideas of Max Weber. Sociologist Max Weber in his work argues that society is always in a state of conflict between rationality and irrationality. When Weber talks about rationality, he describes the idea of exploring and analyzing the world around us through logic and empirically backed arguments. At the time, this was considered to be what distinguishes modern, mostly Western society from older or less developed social structures that try to describe the world through mysticism and magic. Basically, rational thinking means that we as humans understand the world around us and are able to improve our situation by ourselves instead of relying on an external force. Weber, as well as many other writers at that time, does generally support humanism and rationality and admits that the scientific focus on progress that drives this rational world, often referred to as modernity, has its advantages. Advantages that can be seen in everyday life. However, in this quest for progress, Weber believes there are also negative sides to the growing rationalization of this world, and argues that we as a society might have lost something very important along the way. Many older societies were defined by spirituality and religion, which many humanists and rationalists labeled as irrational. By design, religion provides a complete picture of the world, from the beginning to the end, and strives to answer all of life's questions. This gives you a sense of completion and comfort. Science, on the other hand, is primarily focused on progress, often just for the sake of progress. Now, Weber argues that in theory, this means that everything can be known through or controlled by calculation. Modernity values matter over spirit. The idea of magic or any kind of higher force is completely cut from the equation. The world is disenchanted. But why would that be a bad thing? We can agree on the fact that scientific progress and a culture that values rationalism has been quite good for our society. Mortality rates decrease, many diseases that used to be untreatable have become at least manageable. Crime and violence rates tend to be lower. Equality between races, gender, classes, while still not perfect, is higher than ever. Isn't that all a sign that the system works? Now, while the world we live in has definitely many positive aspects, it's far from a picturesque utopia. We were able to solve some of our problems, but in the process we did create some more. Mental illnesses are a problem that's way bigger than just 10 years ago, and not even our planet seems to be able to handle the huge hunger for resources our society has much longer. Sometimes this optimism about progress seems almost like an illusion. In the movie The Prestige, we follow the rivalry between two accomplished magicians, one of them arguing that a good illusion requires an elaborate trick, the other one arguing that showmanship and theatricality are more important aspects of their craft. The story begins with a tragic accident during one of their performances, sparking a bitter feud that drives both magicians to constantly outdo each other in creating the most spectacular and elusive illusions. Magic in The Prestige is presented as a science, a game of intellect. Even in the beginning of the film, Michael Caine's character explains the concept of magic as a formula. A good trick consists of the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. This contradiction runs through the whole film. Magic and illusions, something that by its very definition is not something that should be understood but rather felt and experienced, is immediately shown as a foe. It is a collection of skills and technology that serves to fake a moment of awe for the audience. The magician's audience, however, is not easily impressed. Just as the main characters try to constantly figure out the other's tricks, so do the people in the crowd. They become skeptical and feel the need to figure out the workings behind the illusion. Funny enough, the way Nolan presents his narrative makes us, on the other side of the fourth wall, act just the same way. In many media, we are asked to suspend our disbelief, to immerse ourselves in the story. But The Prestige, just as many other Nolan movies, asks us to do the opposite. It wants us to question the actions that happen on screen and encourages us to not engulf ourselves too much into the enchantment of the story that is obviously just a movie. Even at the end, when the protagonist comes to a point where he actually resorts to real magic, there is never any awe in it. All the value that could have come from this discovery is only seen as a tool that can be used in the main character's battle. The promise of modernity was, for many people, an answer to questions that spirituality did not really address. It promised an absolute truth. But in reality, that was not really the case. As Karl Popper explained once, finding an absolute truth in science is actually logically impossible. His logic was that if science needs empirical data to confirm a thesis, the only way to undoubtedly confirm it is to verify every single case, every single application of this thesis that exists now, has existed, or will ever exist. What science promises is an abstract, theoretical goal that does not correlate with the way people experience the world around them. There is no absolute ultimate meaning. There is no truth with a capital T. The Enchanted Society creates a perfect framework for the individual actors to live in and aims to provide at least a feasible answer to every question someone might ask. You can always be sure that a clear goal has already been thought of, you just have to follow the process to reach it. Christianity, for example, paints a very good picture of heaven as the place that you reach after you live a respectable life. It is a clear goal and there are clear rules you have to follow to get there. Frameworks like this can provide a certain sense of safety and belonging, something that you do not find as easily in a disenchanted world. For Weber, one of, if not the most noticeable effect of the disenchantment of the world is the rise of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy has become the most frequently used organizational structure in modern society because, according to Weber, it is the most efficient. And in a disenchanted world, progress and efficiency are essential. However, bureaucracies tend to concentrate a large amount of power on a very small number of people. The decisions of the people in control can vastly affect the quality of life of the rest of society. He argues that bureaucratization can lead to a high level of depersonalization because individual situations do not get accounted for. This is what Weber calls the iron cage, or in German das stahlharte Gehäuse of modernity. Our current economic order was founded on creative, disciplined and religiously driven economic action. However, today's individual cannot engage in such activities anymore. We are instead forced to labor for a living, typically in narrowly defined specializations, which can easily lead to a loss of motivation in a workforce, and therefore a lot of companies almost have no other choice as to constantly prioritize profits and rationalize production for the purpose of efficiency. It is a devil's circle. Out of all the movies that Nolan made, Tenet is the one I have seen most often, which is interesting since, especially amongst traditional movie critics, it is probably the most criticized. All the things that are usually considered to be Nolan's weaknesses are most developed in this movie. The lack of emotional character development, here the protagonist does not even get a proper name, the overuse of exposition, and that the said exposition is often not even understandable amongst all the sounds, the music and muffling, which I didn't really understand. I didn't have that much trouble understanding the voices. Tenet is a film about an ex-CIA agent who is recruited into a mysterious organization called Tenet, who aims to prevent a future war and allegedly the end of the world. The main antagonist of the movie is a Russian arms dealer who is able to use inversion, a skill that allows objects as well as people to move backwards through time, to put together a doomsday device that can reverse the flow of time for everyone and everything. Nolan's reasoning here is that in this fictional world, the grandfather paradox theory is proven wrong, and influencing the past does not necessarily change the future. Now, time travel and time manipulation are very complex subjects, and trying to get into all the details is a little bit out of scope for this video. However, I do plan to make a separate video in the future talking about time. So please just subscribe to my channel if you want to get an update as soon as this video comes out. Tenet is not a movie about characters. Instead, it focuses on exploring the process of time inversion, especially through the idea of the temporal pincer maneuver. There is an amazing video essay on the YouTube channel Ben from Canada talking about this, doing a far better job at explaining this than I would probably ever be able to do. If you're interested, I will leave a link to the video in the description and you can check it out. In general, the temporal pincer maneuver is the idea of approaching a point in time from two ways, both from the past towards the future and from the future to the past. Can you already see the similarities? Many things that Weber and others criticize can be found within the movie itself. Depersonalization, both within the idea of an unnamed protagonist, as well as the general lack of character development, of emotion, in order to focus more on the technical aspects. The moment Nolan introduces an idea that is more romanticized, it feels almost ridiculous, since the film has drilled you so much into focusing onto the technicalities. Nolan is the one constructing our iron cage. On the narrative level, his use of exposition mirrors Weber's bureaucracy. The story and the plot of the film have become so complex that giving us the story straight just seems to be the most efficient way to make sure that the audience knows all the things that they are supposed to know. It's not the most cinematic, magical way to do this, but the most efficient. The funny thing about the temporal pincer maneuver is that by design it is a nihilistic endeavor. There is no meaning to it. You do not get any kind of advantage over your opponent. Both factions of your forces already know what will happen, since they have been informed about it by the other one. It's a zero-sum game. Just look at the last battle in the Russian mining town. Red team moves forward in time, but right in the beginning we see blue team arriving from the future, sharing their knowledge from the battle with their comrades. The same thing happens most likely after the battle, when red team shares everything about the encounter from their perspective to blue team, which will go through the same process backwards. And you can argue that the same thing is true for the opponents. Everything that happens in this big action sequence is basically meaningless. There are no stakes, there is no agency. Everyone just goes through the motions, if they know it or not. There's no enchantment anymore, it's just bureaucracy. Time reversal is a concept that is in and of itself among the most magical, out-of-this-world things that we can think of. Even one of the characters implies us to don't try to understand it. But the movie pushes us to do the opposite. It makes us want to solve the puzzle. It makes us want to show that our humanity can conquer this obstacle, that with just enough effort we can unveil the wizard behind this curtain. But then what? What happens after we uncover this mystery? Is there still anything left after we have proven our intellect? Or are we basically just trying to eradicate everything that gives this situation meaning? The film does not give us a proper answer to this question. While the story arcs of the main characters, as little as we get about them, kind of tie up any loose ends, Nolan doesn't give us any kind of explanation or solution for the time shenanigans. Basically, at the end of the movie, nothing has really changed in the bigger picture of the narrative, and we are left right in the middle of it, somehow unsatisfied. Weber's picture of the world seemed at times very pessimistic. He believed that rationalization was a continuous process that cannot be undone. From his point of view, the world would keep on spiraling into a state of nihilism, devoid of all meaning. So, what is it that makes a Nolan film a Nolan film? Well, the way that I see it is that his movies do not try to convince you of anything. You get the feeling that you are accepted as an adult who can think for themselves. And Nolan just presents you with something. An idea, a concept that just plays out and allows you, even encourages you to make up your mind about it yourself. Nolan has been described as a postmodern filmmaker, but I believe many people do not really know what to make of that term. The Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek said, Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises shows that Hollywood blockbusters can be precise indicators of the ideological predicaments of our societies. I believe that this is very much how Nolan engages with storytelling. Even though his way of doing things contradicts so many conventions of the medium, still a lot of people connect with his work. It highlights and empathizes a set of problems that many people can relate to, even if they themselves might not realize it at the moment. I'd like to mention that it has been a long time since Weber, Adorno and others wrote down their ideas. And science, both the humanities and the natural sciences, have come a long way since then. Universities actively participate in the discourse on the changes in society, and many scholars in many different fields are very aware of the limitations of their professions. However, in everyday life it is very easy to forget about this. In the world of easily accessible knowledge, we foolishly believe that every solution to a problem is but a click away. And when we realize this is not the case, we falter, we question ourselves, we hurt. This hurt, according to Weber, can take many forms: depression, dissociation, or a longing for any kind of activity that is just as far away from our daily life as we can possibly imagine. But Nolan's work is not pessimistic. While it points out and visualizes many flaws in our system, most of the time there is also hope. It always seems to be possible to find, against all odds, a small light of magic somewhere in the world. In his wide body of work, Theodor Adorno also frequently addresses the disenchantment of the world and the issues that come with the unfulfilled promise of modernity. Adorno, however, was less pessimistic than Weber. While he admitted that the chances for a reversal were low, he was adamant that they were not zero. Adorno believed that we are still able to find awe and magic in our lives. And I do get a similar feeling from Nolan's films. While his films do depict a very rationalized setting, there's always something different as well. When I watch those movies, I sometimes drift off towards an idea from French philosopher Jacques Derrida, aporia. Aporia for Derrida is the feeling you get when you try to pin down the exact meaning of a word or a phrase, but you can't really grasp it, and the meaning seems to slip away, leaving you with just more questions than answers. But Derrida does not consider this to be a bad thing, rather something to be embraced and enjoyed. Derrida urges us to accept our inability to fully understand this world, to kind of open up and let some of the magic we lost back in.